So if you have your Bibles, if you'd open them to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, we're going to pick up in verse 12 today. Just 12 through 15 today. 12 through 15 is all we're going to have. 12 through 15 from chapter 5. Before we stand up to read, let's talk about what we've done in the last couple weeks. Very important. 2 weeks ago, here, we talked about the rapture of the church. The rapture of the church. The great snatching away, right? When the Lord, it says, is going to come, he's going to snatch his bride, the believing church, out off the planet, and then we're going to meet with him. He's going to come back in the clouds. We're going to meet with him there, always to be with the Lord. That is the event that we're waiting for right now. That's the next thing on the prophetic scene. We don't know of any other thing. I don't know of any other thing that needs to happen before the rapture takes place. One of the big pieces of the puzzle, huge pieces of the puzzle. You know, if you were looking at puzzles, some of them are real tiny. This is like the huge pieces of the puzzle when Israel became a nation. That was huge. That was huge. That was a huge piece of the prophetic puzzle. But then it was 1948. Some of you say, well, I wasn't even born then. I wasn't either. But it seems like a long time on one hand. But remember what it says regarding the timing of the Lord. One day is as 1,000 years. 1,000 years as a day. Timing is an interesting thing with the Lord. All that to say, we need to be ready for the rapture. We talked about that 2 weeks ago. And then, what's going to happen after that? Well, we talked about what is called the day of the Lord last week. Scary time coming to the planet. After the rapture, the day of the Lord is going to be, and it's a period of time, 7-year tribulation period on earth, where God is going to pour out his wrath on a Christ-rejecting world. Not just states, that's not a local thing, it's a worldly thing. We'll get to the book of Revelation sooner or later, and we'll be able to see the events that are talked about there. It's horrific, a terrible time. Called Jacob, a time of Jacob's trouble. God is going to be dealing with mostly in that tribulation period with the nation of Israel. And a time, you know, a lot of Jews are going to die. A lot of people are going to die in the tribulation period. Sad to say. But there's a time in that tribulation period which says all of Israel will be saved. All that remain at that point in time. They're going to see Jesus, their Messiah, for who he is. The blinders are going to be taken off, and they're going to see that he, in fact, is the Messiah in the midst of the wrath of God being poured out. Now, we get to chapter 5, and the title of the message is, While We Wait. While we wait. Because what do we do while we wait? Because we're waiting, right? Some in the past, this is true, some in the past, spiritual people, people that believed in God, when they read the prophetic, the Bible, and what was to come, the rapture of the church, some of them got this idea, well, the Lord's coming, we're of another kingdom, and so here's what we'll do. We'll just get white robes on, we'll go up on a hill and wait for the Lord to come back. We don't have to pay our mortgages. Who cares about this, that, or the other? We're just going to wait for Jesus to come back. Throw caution to the wind or whatever you want to have it. And that's not what we're supposed to do. Because, by the way, if you think about that mentality, the one thing that's flawed, and there are many things that are thought about flawed in that thinking, one is it's pretty selfish. Think about it. I've got mine. We've got ours. Let's just go wait on a hill somewhere, sequester our stuff, and wait for the Lord to come back. It may seem like a spiritual thing to do, but it's very selfish. Because we've been left here. Yeah, we're going. We got ours, but we're the church, and we are to take as many people with us as we can. That's the point of the church. So what do we do while we wait? Well, you would think that it's going to speak to this section about evangelism. You know, like, well, we got to get out there and talk to people about the Lord while we wait. Well, it's not mentioned here. There's something here that is the chief witness of God on the earth and God in his church. And we're going to talk about that today, this idea of while we wait. And I want to just say how we treat one another in the church. In other words, the love of God permeating in the church. That, my friends, is a witness to the world. Let's stand together. I'm going to read verses 12 through 15 from 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. And we urge you, brethren, to recognize those who labor among you and are over you in the Lord and admonish you, and to esteem them very highly in love for their work's sake. Be at peace among yourselves. Now we exhort you, brethren, warn those who are unruly, comfort the faint-hearted, uphold the weak, be patient with all. See that no one renders evil for evil to anyone, but always pursue what is good, both for yourselves and for all. Lord, show us, instruct us, encourage us in the faith as we wait. In Jesus' name, amen. You may have a seat. So while we wait, we're going to speak to two different entities here. Verses 12 and 13, the shepherds. Verses 14 and 15, the sheep. Now, not all sheep are shepherds, but all shepherds are sheep, right? You get that? Not all sheep are shepherds, but shepherds are all sheep. We're talking about in the spiritual sense. So we'll divide it up into two sections, the shepherd and the sheep. While we wait, how do we treat the shepherds, the overseers, the shepherds, the elders? It says, and we urge you, brethren, to recognize those who labor among you and are over you in the Lord and admonish you, and to esteem them very highly in love for their work's sake. Be at peace among yourselves. Now, on one hand, you can say, well, this is pretty self-serving, Pastor Bill. It's in the Bible. I'm not going to apologize for the Word of God, first of all. But here's what I want to say to you. It's telling us here, while we wait, how we are to love our leaders. Now, I want to say this to you. This is going to be a witness. The love, the way that we treat our leadership, is a witness to the world, all right? It honors God, and it speaks to the world. Now, briefly, I'll say it this way. What's happening in the world, amongst other things, it's chaotic, all right? We'll just use our nation just because we're in the midst of this. It's chaotic because there's an undermining, it's not even so subtle anymore, of the authority that God has put up. Right? There's an undermining of authority. It starts in the home. There's an undermining of the headship of the father to the children, even in the marriages, the husband and wives. And this idea of the gender thing, that's an attack on the authority of God, is what that is. That's the bottom line to it. And there's an attack in the world attacking leadership. You know, we're told and by the way, we can't be a part of that, what's going on in the world. As far as our leaders, God has spelled out with us how we are to treat them. But now I want to just keep this, kind of reel this in a little bit, tighten it up, is that we're talking specifically now about the church on the inside, all right? I gave you some insiders information earlier, right, about the nodding of the head idea. Well, this is insider information. This is how the church is to treat itself, its own people. In other words, those that are born again. The first thing he says is how you treat your shepherds. We urge you, brethren, to recognize those who labor among you. Now, it's not really funny. It's understandable. God does have a sense of humor. And, the timing of God, those of you, we've experienced this as a church over and over again. Did you know, for example, in light of these verses, did you know that as of October 1st, which a couple of days ago, this is Pastoral Appreciation Month? Did you know that? You didn't. Some of you go, no. You don't need to know that. But I thought it was funny. I mean, it is. It just, as we look at this verse, the timing of God, right? It's Pastoral Appreciation Month. And you know what I always think when I say about that is, that's a Hallmark holiday because we're supposed to appreciate our parents all the time, our pastors all the time, and on and on and on. But I thought it was kind of cute that it came up in the timing of this, right? And by the way, next week is, and I'm not fishing, okay? I want you to know that. This is not a fishing expedition. But next week is the Sunday, because not only do they give them a month, but next Sunday is the Sunday. That's Pastoral Appreciation Sunday. Now, look, if you come bearing gifts, I'm going to feel guilty next week. I want you to know that, all right? They were prompted, they're just well, I know you're a loving group, and you get a little bit of poking a little bit of a goat, and I know you people are loving. Here's what I want to say to you regarding this, as far as I'm concerned. I have experienced the love. The latest was when Candace and I were sick, the way that you guys took care of us and stepped up to the plate and just in the ministry-wise and all the other things, we experienced God's love through your prayers. I mean, unbelievable. You guys were, I know you were praying for us. And so that's love. That we experienced that. There's nothing greater than that. So this is not you guys need to lower, I can honestly say, and I'm not just saying that, I mean that I sense the love that you guys have. So keep loving, okay? That's the word, keep loving, all right? And even when you're admonished, that's one of the words. He says, recognize them, those who admonish you, and esteem them very highly, there it is, in love for their work's sake. It has nothing to do with the person. It has to do with the calling that God, because Jesus is called, he calls shepherds. It's him that puts them there. And so the idea is, there's not going to be any perfect, quote, shepherd in the sense unless it's Jesus. He's the perfect one. And everybody else falls short. But nevertheless, he says to esteem them very highly in love for their work's sake. Listen, we can't be part of what's going on in the world. The undermining of authority, right? Whether it's in the home, whether it's in the church. Listen, Satan, you've heard me say this, has a wedge factory. He has a wedge factory. And he is all about trying to tap a little wedge between married people, tap between the husband and the wife, relationships, tap between the leadership of the church, tap. Gossip does that. Whenever gossip is going on, guess what? There's a little tap, little wedge getting put in there, right? And the idea is that, and then they'll come and tap, and eventually it's to separate. Divide and conquer is Satan's strategy. Could give you a secular example of this. Our nation. Listen, the political parties, the latest thing is they're divided. There's a huge divide it used to be just the political, now even the individual political parties everybody's divided. We're living in a time where Matthew 24 says everybody will be easily offended. Brother will go against brother. I mean, we're in this place where this divide, there's a division taking place, and it's Satan himself wanting to divide people along the color of their skin, along the socioeconomic, of gender, all these things, every little divisive line you can imagine, and they're more and more being added every day, it seems. And so in the secular sense, in our nation, Satan has got this huge, right now people are mad at each other. And so he's had some success in dividing. Now, this is a prophetic sign. One of the things apparently that the Antichrist is going to come on the scene, and he's going to have some answers. Unity. Yeah. We're all primed now because of the division. Some people, the president's come on and he said, I'm not slamming him, he said, and I think he maybe really believed that I'm going to be the great unifier. Well, we're not seeing that. I'm not blaming it on him. I'm just saying this is where we're at. Everything is coming down the pike to divide, and it's in the world, we're seeing that. It's just happening. And of course, when you push God out, right? When you push him out, the God of order, you get chaos. And that's what we're looking at as our nation. But the church is different. And Satan is desiring to be in the church and to divide the church. He's done it with denominational lines already, right? There are those things that we won't find them in the Bible. But even in the local body, this church, our church, I've seen it through the years, he seeks to divide us in many different ways. One of the ways that he will divide us is to attack the shepherds. And you do have, as one person put it, when you become in leadership, you get a big bullseye on your back. I remember hearing that for the first time, and I thought, wow, that sounds, but you don't, and then you realize when you knew what spiritual warfare was before until you get in there, and then you see it gets stepped up to this level. Now, here's what I want to say to you. What comes with that, of course, is more dependence on the Lord, right? And you see that this is what I want to say to you, and this is hard to convey. I hope you get what I'm trying to say. If you would ask me, so what's it like to be a pastor? I would say, there's a part of me that wants to say, it is the hardest thing I've ever done. But in the fact, when I say that, that's really not true. Here's what I mean. It's not an easy thing, but every time something hard comes along, God gives me the grace to do it, and it doesn't seem hard. Does that make sense? I can't even say, it's the hardest thing I've ever done. The hardest thing I've ever done was the things that I did without the Lord. Now, those things were hard. They had terrible endings, turmoil in the midst of some of the things, the choices that I made. Now, that was hard, because living life apart from the Lord is hard. So being a pastor, well, it has some things in it, seemingly hard things to do, but God always meets you right there. And when he's empowering you, when you're in the midst of it, it doesn't seem hard. That's all I can say. And you know what I mean by that? It's just, and by the way, that's not just for pastors, it's for whatever your call is. Being a parent, being married. I don't want to be too. I love newly marrieds. They have all these expectations, riding off into the sunset. They found their prince. Yeah, some of you are laughing because you've been married before. You know what it's like. They find their prince. Hey, we give them premarital counseling, 6 to 8 weeks. We try to prepare them for what's about to happen. I had one, I realized I was a little bit too, finally, after about 6 weeks in, this very sweet girl says to me, that was going to be the wife, Pastor Bill, is there anything good about getting married? And I realized, well, I better just tone it down a little. Because you're trying to prepare them for what's maybe ahead. Not maybe. I mean, the only one that's married to Jesus is the church, right? The whole church. But every other marriage is flawed, right? And it's a miracle that people even make it through. I don't know how people do it without the Lord. A lot of them don't, with the divorce rates and everything else. But anyway, I've heard talked to some people lately said, this is really hard. And I thought, yeah, they didn't do this particular couple didn't do the premarital. I don't even know, they can't really prepare you for what's about to happen until you're in it. See? And then you got to depend on the grace of God as a Christian. Every time, every situation, God's going to carry you through it. You're going to get through the hard times. So, the idea is of just trusting him in the midst of it. He's going to take you through some hard things. But in the midst of it, he says, I want you to love the people that I've put around you. And you may say sometimes, how in the world did they ever get to be a pastor? That's a good question. I often think, well, and it's true. When I think about who God's raising up and selecting, And I mean it. I thought, I would have never sent me here when I got sent here, knowing what I know now. I mean, because was I ready? Can you ever be ready for it? No, it's just what God does. And that's the beautiful thing about it. We look for him and his hand in something, and he raises up. Now, so I want to read to you just a word for you from Hebrews 13:17 regarding what we just said, how you treat a shepherd. Hebrews 13:17. Obey those who rule over you and be submissive. Well, let me think. I know that could be hard to hear, but listen to this part. For they watch out for your souls as those who must give account. Let them do so with joy and not with grief, for that would be unprofitable for you. Obey those who rule over you and be submissive, for they watch out for your souls as those who must give account. Let them do so with joy and not with grief, for that would be unprofitable for you. Now, remember seeing the account of Jesus talking to Peter. Remember when Peter went fishing, he didn't catch anything all night. Jesus had put the net on the other side. The net was filled to over. And happy ending to a story, right? So Jesus is talking to Peter. Peter, he says this, do you love me? Remember that? Do you love me? Well, yeah, Lord. Feed my sheep. And he says again, Peter, do you love me? Well, yeah, Lord, you know all things. Tend my sheep. And then the third time, Peter, do you love me? Lord, feed my sheep. Now, what I took from that several years back was this idea of Jesus didn't say to Peter, Peter, do you love me? Feed your sheep. Tend your sheep. Feed your sheep. No, he didn't say that. In other words, you, me, we belong to Jesus. You're no man's flock. I reject the idea that, oh, that's your flock. No, you're not my flock. It doesn't mean I don't care for you, but you're somebody else's flock. You're Jesus' flock. And guess what it says there in Hebrews 13:17? That I will give an account someday to how I took care of his flock. And that should scare the daylights out of somebody. It should scare the day. I'm getting chills just thinking about it now. I figure if I teach the Word of God to you the best I can and try and model it, I'll be okay, right? I'll be okay on that day. Not like the day that I borrowed my neighbor Tony's lawnmower. And at Tony's, I think I had a push mower, one of those ones. You remember those ones? You push and the thing turns around. And Tony saw me in my plight one day. I had very little backyard. I was fenced in, just small, okay? But it was like steep. Got the last lot. It was the cheapest one. Okay, one of those deals. But the point is, Tony saw me one day, must have seen me. He says, hey, man, Bart, use my lawnmower. Tony had, remember the old school lawnmowers? Now they don't have these anymore, I don't think. The plug-in electrics, remember those? Yeah, okay. Now they got the cordless. They didn't have that back in those days. Here, use my lawnmower. So I got Tony's lawnmower. I'm over there. I ran over his cord. It's easy to happen, right? They should have a cord that's easily replaceable because that happens. I borrowed somebody else's thing, and now I had to go back to Tony and tell him, oh, man, Tony. And I don't want to do that with the Lord. You see what I'm saying? It's like, I know it pales by comparison, but it's the same idea. I did not want to face Tony. Yeah, I felt so bad because I'd done that to Tony's lawnmower. Oh, I can tape it up, but it's never going to be the same now, right? Let's put some tape on. I tell you the truth, I don't even remember telling him. I know I told him, but it's like I blacked it out. I have no memory of that conversation whatsoever, only that I did that. And this has been in the 80s, okay? It's a long time ago. But I don't want to have to face the Lord. Say, Bill, feed my sheep. They're my sheep. Tend my sheep. And his sheep matter to him. But remember, Jesus is the chief shepherd. We're all going to fall short, obviously, of this in these areas for sure. But make no mistake, verses 12 and 13 tell us that that's important to the Lord. And that is what love looks like towards your leadership, right? To recognize them, esteem them very highly in love for their work's sake, not because of who they are, not because of their personality, but because of their work's sake, the call that they have on their life, because God put them there. And then he says, be at peace among yourselves. There will be peace when there's God's love permeating. There's peace in the midst of that. Very important. And by the way, this is one of the things that I talked about evangelism. This is the evangelism, the fact that we can have peace, we can have respect, we can have submission in the right way. Things are in order in the church. That is a witness to the world. That's a witness to the world. The love that we have for one another. God's love that we have for one another. Very important. Very basic. And this is what we do while we wait. We love while we wait. We love on one another. And this is the specifics. Because we hear this, right? The world will know that you're my disciples by the love you have for one another. Well, what does that actually look like? The tangible look of that. He says, well, you do this. You respect your leaders. That matters to God. And by the way, I've said this to you before, and I'll repeat it again, because I'm supposed to admonish, it says right there. And here's my admonition for you regarding this idea of cultivating a submissive heart, okay? Because we're not like that in the natural realm. We're rebels, all of us, at heart, apart from Christ. But one of the things that we have to do is we practice this. This is a sanctification process. I would encourage you in these last days and of all time. And this will be easier for you when there's, your candidate, let's say, is in the Oval Office. But it doesn't matter if your candidate's in the Oval Office or not. You need, in my mind, what I try to do is call them by their name or by their title, President so-and-so. That's good for me because it helps me to submit to God because I'm submitted to God as I do that. If I get in this, if I fall into what the world's doing and I want to bash and gossip about and call them by some name, I mean, how would you like it if I went around just calling you, by your last name? That wouldn't even be nice amongst ourselves. And it shouldn't be accepted. We just have to be careful because you say, well, they don't deserve it. Well, wait a second. It's not about whether they deserve it or not. God has said, that's in Romans chapter 12, verse 13. He says that you need to submit yourself. No better way than to get my heart right is to call them by what they are. President so-and-so, right? That is being respectful, and that helps me to keep my heart where it needs to be before God. Here's the bottom line to it. As we cultivate this respect in the church, it should go out. In other words, you just don't act a certain way in here, then go out there and act a different way, right? So if it's cultivated here, then in other words, we should be the most respectful person out in the public square as Christians. There are none of us perfect, all right? But this is what God's saying. You want to make a difference in the world? Because people are complaining. Things are terrible. Things are awful. What can we do? How can we change this? Okay, you can do something. You can be respectful. You can follow God. You can honor God. You can honor the offices as God tells us, and that, believe it or not, will make a difference. How do you treat shepherds? Verses 12 and 13 tells us. Now, how do we treat the sheep or amongst ourselves? So he lays out, this is what love looks like. This is love walked out. Verse 14. Now we exhort you, brethren. The first thing he says, warn those who are unruly. And someone said, now there you go. That's my ministry. I got a rebuking ministry. I got to warn those who are unruly. Some people think that's what their ministry is. Warning the unruly. Warning the unruly. I want to just say this. First of all, keep in mind, we're talking again about the church now. We're not trying to change everybody's morals out in the public square, the non-believers. Because Jesus said, what good is it if a man gains the whole world? What if he's the best moral person in the world and he loses his own soul? What good is that? No good. That's what? Temporary good at best. What we're here is to tell people about Christ. But so we don't go and try and clean up the world by telling people they need to stop doing this and start doing that. No, they need to get saved. The same thing needs to happen to them that happened to you. So that then the work begins. It's from the inside out. You get a new heart, you get changed, and then you get a desire to do what's right, to be righteous, to do the right thing before God. You're moved by the fear of the Lord. And it's no longer just trying to stay out of the way of the police. You realize that there's there's a Supreme Court. I'm talking about the capital S Supreme Court, and that's the Lord himself. He's the judge, and our hearts change. So what is he talking about? Not the world. He's talking about the church. Yes, believe it or not, there are times when Christians are unruly. They don't want to follow look at it says, they don't want to follow the rules. They're off. They've drifted, or they, we've all like sheep, we wander, we've gone astray, each to his own way. And there's a time when we, as one another's, have to warn them, right? That's what love looks like sometimes. We give a warning. Now, I would suggest to you, how we do it is everything. The Bible makes it clear. If you want to take the speck out of your brother's eye, first take the beam out of your own eye. That means that you need to pray. You need to go. There's a time when you may see someone else's sin in their life even. And God hasn't called you to go and to even warn them necessarily with a vocal. The first thing he's called you to do is pray. That's our most powerful weapon. Pray for them. And as you continue to pray for them, some people just want to warn the unruly because when in the person being unruly, it's affecting them in a negative way. That's you're going to be dangerous in that place if you're going to warn somebody because they're putting you out somehow, and you're going to go and be the warner. Oh, that's not going to end well. It's just not going to end well. I want to say this to you in verses 14 and 15. The only one who does all these things perfectly right is Jesus. Okay? He's the only one. Now, I want to say to you, because he dwells in us, we have the ability to do right, but we don't always do it right. All right? But we are called to warn. There's a time to warn the unruly. All different kinds of people in the church, right? Different places of their walk. We are. We just have to love on one another. But there's a time to warn those who are unruly. God will show us each situation by situation. Now, look at this. We go from warning the unruly to comforting the faint-hearted. The quaking violets, those who the faint-hearted, those that maybe even have gone through tough times and they're just losing heart, right? The one thing we don't want to do as a church, look, the world is all about this. Kicking someone when they're down, right? It's not more clear than it is today. They have a name for it, it's called cancel culture, but it's really just getting rid of someone, squashing them out like a bug. Kicking a man when he's down. Here's what it looks like. Jesus Christ on the cross being crucified for the sins of the world. And people down below looking up, you saved yourself. Come down from that cross if you're who you say you are. That's called kicking a man when he's down. Kicking a man when he's down. Now, of course, that was Jesus they were kicking, you could say, in that way. And he had the proper response. Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Wouldn't it be nice if we could always respond that way when people kicked us? Hey, you're going to be kicked when you're down sometimes. And you say, well, I thought the world would kick me when I'm down, but I didn't think another Christian would do that. Listen, We're all at different places. We make mistakes, unfortunately. But don't kick someone when they're down. Instead, you comfort them. You comfort them. You come alongside of them. You show them. You bring the Lord into the midst. And listen, this brings comfort to me. Because here's the thing: the devil's wanting to kick you while you're down. He's wanting other people to take a kick. Go ahead. Yeah, and they're easy targets when people are down. It's easy to kick them. They can't move. But comfort the faint-hearted. The Lord would say, comfort the faint-hearted. I love this comfort. Listen, for example, this is one of the things that we have. We have the Spirit of God. So when we sin, we feel horrible about it. We feel horrible about the sin. And this is what I want to say, comforting the faint-hearted, is that I say, because they've lost hope, they're even a Christian sometimes, but the idea is, hey, look, is your life at all, the fact that you're not happy about what's happened, that you feel bad about it, that's an indicator that you're a child of God. That's can bring comfort. But here's what I would say to you. The Lord knows what the person needs, but we're to comfort the faint-hearted. Now, and then the next thing he says is to uphold the weak. The weak. Sometimes, I'm thinking about the physical nature. He's talking about spiritual things now, but when you get to be a certain age, you realize that you don't have the strength, and sometimes you'll take an older person because they're weak. You'd actually help them up the steps or in situations because they are weak. Now, and that would be the physical sense, but that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about the weak in spirit, the weak brother, the weak sister. And we need to come alongside, and there's times that we need to hold each other up, encourage one another. And this is a process. We're all at different places and different giftings, but know this is that Jesus is in the business. This is what he's called us to do as sheep, to take care of the sheep. It's not just the shepherd who would take care of the sheep. Of course, he needs to be involved in this, but we all will play a place, will be a part of this, upholding the weak among us. Some of us are stronger than others in the Lord. And then, not only that, but while you're doing this, while you're warning the unruly, while you're comforting the faint-hearted, while you're upholding the weak, be patient with all. Now, this is, from my understanding of what I've seen in the last number of years, it's impossible. This part of being patient with all is impossible apart from God. This matters to God. Exercising love, because the fruit of the Spirit is love, but it's kind and it's long-suffering and is kind in the process. This idea of being patient with all. That's the fruit of the Spirit, patience. He's working that out. So I don't have much patience. Well, I get news for you. God's going to take care of that for you. Don't worry about it. Count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. And let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect, lacking nothing. Listen, we all need patience. And again, that's while we wait, right? We need patience. God says, I want you to be patient with all my sheep. All of them. Listen, some of the sheep are easier to love than others, and there'll be seasons for that, right? It's like people, we have terms, high maintenance, they're high maintenance. Well, here's the reality of that. Stone cold reality. God knew who you needed. You needed someone that was, quote, high maintenance, because there's work to be done on you. I know we always look at the other person, well, they're high maintenance. Yeah, apparently you needed somebody that was high maintenance right now. That's what you need, right? Because it's iron sharpening iron. But the Lord says, not just with some, not just with the weak need to be patient, not just with the faint-hearted do you need to be patient, but even those who are unruly. Yeah, you need to be patient because God is patient. And then verse 15, See that no one renders evil for evil to anyone. Now, on one hand, you think, oh, they've now shifted to the world, right? This has got to be talking about the world now, verse 15. No, we're talking about the church. That's right. There's evil comes into the church, unfortunately. We're in a battle, good versus evil. Certainly it's happening in the public square, and it seems like evil's winning out there, but it's obviously God's won the victory. The war is over, you could say. It's the war is won, I should say, but we're still battling. But here's what's being said. If somebody does evil to you, sad, right? I mean, you've heard stories. Oh, I don't go to church anymore because somebody did this, that, and the other. Sad to say, but here's what I would say to you. This returning evil for evil is something that we did from the time we were small. This is the default for the human, right? You see it in kids, children. Whack! Next thing you know, whack! And it goes, I'll show you. And it's the default. I remember sometimes you get bad counsel in the church, right? I remember there was a marriage. It wasn't mine, somebody else's, and it was so terrible. It was having such hardship that they were actually publicly fighting outside the church. I mean, when I say fighting, I'm not talking about an argument. I'm talking about they were going to fisticuffs. I mean, can you imagine that? And it was happening. And so somebody got this idea, because, apparently when it gets to that point, now these people are professing Christians, when it gets to that point, you got a problem, right? And they had counseling, they've had other things. Now, so somebody came with this brilliant, I say brilliant, but I don't mean it. I'm being facetious, just to be clear. And this person in a place of leadership says this, okay, what we have to do here, talking to the husband now, right? What you need to do is you need to mirror. It's called mirroring. So you need to treat her the way she's treating you, right? Yeah. No, that was the counsel. Now listen, I love that kind of counsel because that's what I want to do in my flesh. You do that to me, I'll show you. I'll do that back to you. Am I the only one that thinks evil thoughts like that? That's what I want to do. They don't understand what they're doing to me right now. I'm going to show them. They need to understand. My flesh does that automatically. I guess I'm a mirror in the flesh. I just want to do that. It's not biblical, though. I can't do that. I don't want to return evil for evil. Even if I judge something to be evil. Of course, when I judge my own evil, I'm a little lighter on myself than on somebody else, right? That's just, the nature of man, unfortunately. But I can't return evil for evil. That was bad counsel. So if you know what mirroring is, throw that out. That baby with the bathwater, throw it all out. That's not biblical. Instead, you don't return evil for evil. That's not loving. It doesn't, and we know that it doesn't work, right? It doesn't work. I know it seems in the flesh that it would work, but it's unbiblical. See that no one renders evil for evil to anyone. So what do we do instead? Okay? What do? Forgive. That's what. The first thing we need to do when somebody brings evil on us, we need to forgive. That's it. They don't have to come to me and ask for forgiveness and then I'll forgive. No. The first thing I need to do, the first thing that Christ did, right? Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. He didn't sit there and tell them, do you realize what you're doing is sinful right now? You're kicking a man when he's down. He didn't give him a lecture, a tongue lashing. He knew what they needed. They needed forgiveness. He had an insight, obviously. He saw people not for what they were doing to him, but he saw their spiritual condition that made them look at the Son of God on the cross who was dying for their sins so that they could have eternal life and live with the Father forever. And they were rejecting him, not only just rejecting him, not just saying no to Jesus, but they were mocking him in the process. Boy, they were in a bad spiritual way. And he had the ability to see that. He wasn't taking it as a person. We get all up in the personal assault of, I'm receiving evil. Listen, you say, well, that was Jesus. That's why he did that. Don't expect me to be like that. But what about Stephen? He wasn't Jesus. The same thing. They're stoning him. The last thing before he dies, he says, Lord, don't hold this sin to their account. That's Christ-like. How in the world did he do that? By the grace of God. Only by the grace of God. Yes, it's possible for you not to render evil. Instead, forgiveness to someone. That's what they need. That will change them. Love will change them more than a personal attack. Oh, that's what Satan wants you to do. Remember the little wedge. Yeah, look what they did to you. Yeah, you need to do this. Don't ever talk to them again. Bang the wedge in there. And so see that no one returns evil for evil to anyone. And then he says, but always pursue what is good, both for yourselves and what for all. And I would say to you, first and foremost, as Jesus said when they called him good teacher, he says, why do you call me good? There's only one good, and that's God. Now he's pointing to himself, of course. But what I want, even though in our founding documents, they mentioned God or creator, we had a creator, but the pursuit of life, liberty, and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Here's what I'm going to say to you. In my mind, that's a little flawed, that idea for Christians anyway. In my mind, it would have been much better if they said in the pursuit of Jesus Christ. To me. Or even the pursuit of God, or the pursuit of your creator. But that's the world. We're talking about the church now. So when I'm pursuing what is good, I'm following Jesus. That's my pursuit. But in that, he says, pursue always, but always pursue what is good, both for yourselves and for all. Listen, if you follow Jesus, that's the best thing for me. If I follow Jesus, that's the best thing for you. If we follow Jesus, that's the best thing for this church. That's the best thing we can do for America even. Because there's all kinds of people, even the church, man, this is happening. We got to do this. We got to get involved this way, that way, everything else. You need to follow Jesus and pursue what is good. That can change the world. Only the Lord can do that. Will he? Because we know the end of the story, don't we? We know the end of the story. Now, there may be a great revival that takes place in our nation of an inviting back of God into our national life. That could happen. It could happen. It needs to happen. If it doesn't happen, then this nation isn't going to last much longer. That's the truth. That's not even some kind of prophetic utterance. It's as easy. I mean, if you have eyes to see, if you can't see that, unless God intervenes. But the church, and we're talking about the church now, is to pursue what is good, and that's Christ, both for yourselves and for all. In other words, it's not just about you. It's about the whole unit. Because we are the body of Christ, and we are the ones that he's left on the planet to let people know that God is real in these last days, that God is real. So, how do you treat while we wait? We love while we wait. That's how we treat our leadership or the shepherds, and that's how we treat the sheep. And we're going to fall down miserably at it, but when God's called us to do it, it's possible. I'm going to ask the guys to come forward. We're going to pass out.